Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode in this series of how to build the game Asteroids inside of Unity. In this first episode, we will be going over the player movement. So you can see that I have a sample scene set up with nothing inside of it. I'm going to quickly change the camera to be black, and I'm going to change the background type to solid color, and then change the color to black. Now once I've done that, I'm going to create a 2D object, a sprite, and then a triangle. I'm going to name this triangle player. I'm going to add a box collider 2D to the player, and then I'm also going to add a rigid body 2D. On this rigid body, I'm going to change the gravity scale to 0, the interpolate to interpolate, and collision detection to continuous. Now I'm going to add a script to my player, so I'm going to click add component, new script, and then I'm going to name it player movement. So now I'm going to open up this in my choice of coding editor, which is Microsoft Visual Studio, but you can open it in whatever you would want. I'm going to delete both these methods. We will use them again, but not right now. I'm going to get a reference to my rigid body 2D and name it RB. I'm going to get a public float and name it speed. I'm going to get another public float, and I'm going to name this turn speed. Then I'm going to get the awake method, and then I'm going to set RB equal to get component rigid body 2D. Awake is called before start, so even before we are inside the game, we're going to have a reference to our rigid body. So now inside of update, I'm going to set our rb.add force, and then I'm going to get our input. So it's going to be input.getAxis raw. It's going to be vertical times our speed times our transform.up. Now this is going to be the movement up and down because this is a vertical axis, and it's going to be multiplied by our transform.up, so that if we turn, we can move to the side and we're not always moving straight up and down. Then I'm going to also do rb.add torque. It's going to be the same thing. Input.getAxis raw horizontal times turn speed. And we don't need to multiply it by anything because this is just going to turn our player. Now, if we go back inside of Unity and check our player, check that these values, I'm going to set them to 1 right now, and then I'm going to click play. Now, once we're inside of play mode, I'm going to check that these values, you can see that that value of 1 is just a bit too much. So what I'm going to do is change the angular damping on my rigid body to 2. So now you can see that my player, he slows down a lot faster. And I'm just going to move him back inside of here. And I'm also going to change the linear damping to be 2 as well. So now if I move him back, I'm going to change the turn speed to something like 0.1. So now if I try this out, you can see that this feels a lot better. But if you're trying this out, you can see that when I'm pushing the A key, my player turns clockwise. And that's the opposite of what I want to happen. So what I'm going to do is just invert the get axis. So it's negative now. So now the turning should be the same direction that I want to. I'm going to change turn speed back to 0.1, and I'm going to change both these dampings to be 2. Those dampings are just like friction. The angular damping is friction for turning, and the linear damping is friction for moving forward and backward. Now, I'm going to create a script that moves our player from the top down to the bottom whenever he goes off the screen. Because we always want the player to be inside the screen. If the player goes out, we want to teleport him back to the bottom. So now, I'm going to create an empty game object, and I'm going to name it boundary, and then I'm going to add a component, and I'm going to name it boundary as well. Now this boundary, if I go back inside of Unity, and then once I can open it back up, I'm going to get a vector 2, and this is I'm going to name it bounding box. This is going to be the bounding box of the place that the player can't go out of. So I'm going to set it to be public so we can set it inside of the inspector. And then I'm going to check update. And then we're going to need to reference the player. So I'm also going to get a public transform, and I'm going to name it player. So now if I'm going to check a few things. So I'm going to check if player.position.x is greater than boundingbox.x. So if it is outside, then I'm going to set player.position is equal to a new vector 2, and it's going to be negative boundingbox.x and then player.position.y. And now I'm just going to copy this and then paste it one more time. And instead of this, I'm going to make it if the player.position.x is less than the negative of the bounding box, then I'm setting the player's position to the positive bounding box. Then I'm just going to duplicate this line again, and I'm going to check it for the y. So if y is greater than the bounding box.y, then I'm setting the player's position to player.position.x and then negative bounding box.y. Then if I duplicate this one more time, and then if I do less than negative bounding box.y, then I'm going to set it to positive bounding box. And if this doesn't make sense, just take a second to think about it, because all this is doing is just when the player moves out of the bounds, we are just shooting him back inside again. So now I'm going to go back inside of Unity, and on the boundary, for the bounding box, I'm going to do something like 5 by 5, and for the player, I'm going to drag it in there. I'm not really sure how big 5 by 5 is, but we can check if we go inside of play mode. If we go here, we can see that the player is nicely moving across the sides. And you can see that 5 by 5 is maybe a bit too small, so maybe on the X I'm going to make it 10, and maybe on the Y I'm going to make it 8. So now if we try, maybe I'm going to change the Y to be something like 7. So now if we try again, you can see that this looks pretty reasonable. Maybe if I change the Y to something like 6, it will be a bit more reasonable. See, now it looks that the player is just going off one end and then coming back into another. And if we go back outside, I'm going to change these values back to 10 and 6. And with that, this first episode is finished. In this episode, we covered how to add our player movement for Asteroids and how to add player wrapping with our boundaries. If you liked this episode, please give our channel a like and subscribe, because it really helps out a ton. And if you like this, make sure to stay tuned for next week, where we add spawning the asteroids into our Asteroids game. Thank you.